Welcome, distinguished guests. Today we will be discussing some exquisite technology, the iPad Pro, the Wacom Move Ink Pad Pro 14. We will also be bringing in the esteemed Samsung Galaxy S11 Ultra as well. Derek, cue the introduction. Hey, this isn't the music. You're ruining the vibe. All of these tablets are fantastic. If you dangled me off the edge of a cliff and said, you can only choose one drawing tablet in the whole universe, it would be one of these three. Actually, it would probably come down between the Wacom and the iPad. So if you came here because you are having trouble deciding between these three devices, don't feel bad. They're all fantastic, and probably whichever one you get is going to be perfect for you. But there are some differences and a lot of things worth talking about here, so I figured it's worth breaking down. The most important thing to know about these three devices is that they are all standalone, so you don't need to connect them to a computer to use them necessarily. And nowadays, even though the iPad runs its own apps and Android runs a different set of apps, they all have really good art and drawing apps on them. And all three of these come with really solid, good pens. These are also really expensive, the most expensive standalone tablets out there nowadays. So if you were looking for something a little bit more budget, there's some great stuff out there too. I rank all the stuff that I review over my website if you want an overview. And with that, Derek, cue us into our first category. Okay, the music is wrong again. I bought a monocle for this. One of the most important things on any tablet is the screen and the size as well. Now, all the ones that I tested here are the big versions, but the iPad Pro comes in two different sizes. There's an 11-inch and a 13-inch. In general, I like drawing on the larger sizes. I just like having more of the screen real estate. However, if you get an 11-inch version of one of these tablets, it's still pretty darn good, and that's mostly because mobile apps are less cluttered, more refined. The interface kind of gets out of your way. That's not universally true. For example, if you want to draw on Android and Krita, there's still a lot of interface elements. It's basically the desktop app running on Android. But apps like Clip Studio has a streamlined interface. Procreate, streamlined interface. So on a smaller tablet, they still work really, really well. The Wacom here only comes in this giant 14-inch version. Now, Wacom does make a smaller Android tablet, but that has much lower specs, and that's worth noting too. The Samsung comes in two different sizes. It comes in 11-inch and the Ultra, which is 14.6 inches, almost 15 inches. And when you look at the size of the Wacom next to the size of the Samsung, dimensionally, they're almost identical. Although the bezels on the Samsung are a lot thinner, which lets you get a little bit more screen real estate. Not a meaningful amount, but a little bit more. All of these displays are also very pixel dense. What does that mean? It means that their resolutions are pretty darn high. So you really gotta get in close if you wanna see any pixels. They're all crisp, they're all beautiful, they all have really great color calibration out of the box. The Samsung and the Wacom are a 16:10 aspect ratio. That's more similar to like a TV screen. The iPad's aspect ratio is 4:3, which is more squarish, still a rectangle, but more squarish. When you're trying to decide whether you want a large version or a small version of one of these devices, it comes down to what you're going to be using it for. I think if you want to use this more for media consumption, especially for reading or playing games, sometimes going with a smaller one is a little bit better, especially when we're talking about like the ultra size, that 15-incher, because holding that when you're reading, kind of clunky. Not the best experience in the world, even though it's great for drawing. Now, each one of these is rocking an OLED display, and each one of these also is coming in at 120 hertz. So sliding between apps, changing things around, just the general animation on these devices looks really slick and smooth. It's worth noting that the iPad Pro and the Samsung now come with something called a dual OLED display. And what that's doing is it's taking two OLEDs and putting them together to really enhance the brightness. Putting these three screens together, even though they're all OLEDs, I could definitely tell that the Wacom isn't quite as good as the other two. That's not to say it's bad. It's really, the colors look great. But one of the things that takes away from the Wacom screen intensity a little bit is it has a matte coating on it. I'm going to talk more about that in the pencils section of the video. But that matte coating is to reduce glare, but also to give you a better drawing experience. It's a trade-off that I'm happy to make, but not everybody will be. There are two downsides to OLED. One is something called screen burn-in. Now, overall, this problem has been kind of solved, or at least dramatically improved over the last few years, and is not something I personally worry about anymore. But the other one is screen flicker. Now, this is where you can actually see it when I film these things. OLED screens just tend to flicker a bit more. This is not something you notice, at least visually looking at these in person, even though it shows up better on camera. Even though you can't see it in person, your eyes can still subliminally detect it. Many people report having headaches if they use an OLED display for too long. You know what doesn't give you a headache though, is my Learn to Draw in 60 Days course. These are pro level tablets, so this course might not really apply to you because it's really designed for beginners. I've got a Black Friday sale going on right now. If you'd like to learn more about the course and all the content that's packed into it, check out my website, bradsartschool.com. This is the part where we go to the next section and you play the wrong music. Okay, this is wrong, but not as obnoxious. It's also worth noting that the hardware in all these devices is really good. First of all, the Apple has the M5 processor in their latest Pros. This is really, really good. In fact, it's overkill for what we're doing here. There are very few apps on the iPad that can actually take advantage of this processor. But the good news is that if you do buy an iPad now, you know your iPad is going to last you a really, really long time. Now, one of the big steps up to this generation of iPads is that this base model now comes with 12 gigabytes of RAM. That comes with the 256 and 512 gigabyte storage configurations, and you can get 16 gigabytes of RAM if you go with a 1 or 2 terabyte configuration. In drawing apps, the more RAM you have, the bigger the files you can work with. For example, in Procreate on the iPad, you just get more layers when you have more RAM. If I make a canvas the size of this screen, in Procreate I get 222 layers with my 16 gigabytes of RAM that I have on my iPad, but on the 12 gigabytes, I'd only get around 200 layers in Procreate. The bigger your canvas gets, the less layers you get. On the Galaxy tab, we have a MediaTek Dimensity 9400 Plus processor. This is one of the best Android processors out there right now. Not as good as the M5, but still pretty good. Our storage configurations come in at 128, 256, and 512 and 1 terabyte, with the first two having 12 gigabytes of RAM like the iPad, and that 1 terabyte model having 16 gigabytes like the higher end iPads. It's also worth noting here that the Galaxy Tab has a micro SD card slot, so if you need more storage, you can add your own. Now the Wacom tablet has a Snapdragon 8S Gen 3 processor. Not the best processor out there right now, but pretty solid. It's this one area where it lags behind its competitors, but is gonna absolutely chew through any drawing app that you throw at it. This does only come in one configuration though. You get 12 gigabytes of memory and 256 gigabytes of storage. It does also have a micro SD card slot in it though, so you can add more storage to it as well. Let's talk about these pens. Where's our music? We've just ditched the music now? Oh, okay. We should have stayed with no music. My bad. I like drawing with all these things. First of all, Apple Pencil. Really good. It charges when you snap it to the side of the iPad magnetically. This is using the latest Apple Pencil Pro, which came out last year. And the drawing tech on the Apple Pencil hasn't really changed at all in the last 10 years, but some of the other features around that drawing tech have. So for example, now there's a barrel roll feature that you can spin the pencil as you're drawing, and it's actually going to turn the brush that you're using in your drawing app if your brush is set up to do that. You can also squeeze that barrel and bring up different options in different apps. Again, if your app supports that. But generally, this is just a fantastic stylus to draw with. You've probably seen a lot of artists on Instagram and all over the internet using the Apple Pencil. It is one of the most, if not the most popular stylus out there today. Then there's the S Pen. Now the S Pen is using Wacom's technology. Now Wacom's EMR technology kind of comes in two flavors. There's the low end, which is the technology that the S Pen is made with, and there's the high end, which is what the Wacom Pro Pen is made out of, which is the pen that comes with the Wacom Moving. And I think the S Pen is good enough, at least for most situations. And when I'm recommending tablets to new people, I think the S Pen is really good. However, if you're a pro and you're used to using a Wacom tablet, coming over to the S Pen can feel like it's a little bit lacking. It just doesn't feel quite as responsive. It's a very lightweight stylus, so in your hand it's not nearly as comfortable to hold for long periods of time. The initial activation rate isn't quite as good. And so if you're used to using a Wacom drawing tablet, these are things you might notice. And this is a reason why you might want to check out the Move Ink instead. In fact, I think this is one of the greatest features of the Move Ink tablet is the fact that you're getting Wacom's Pure Pro Pen 3 in all its glory right here on an Android tablet. From the moment I turned this thing on and started sketching in Clip Studio, I was absolutely in love with this stylus. It feels so darn good. Like, this was the moment where I thought, do I really want to ditch my iPad? Because I might want to ditch my iPad. It is fantastic. And I think one of the things that sets it apart isn't necessarily the stylus itself and how good it is, but that the Wacom comes with a textured screen surface, like a matte coating on the screen. The iPad, smooth glass. The Galaxy, smooth glass. This little bit of matte texture gives you a little bit more resistance with that pen and just makes it an absolute joy to draw with. The Apple Pencil is probably the least good feeling out of the three here, and oftentimes I will put a screen protector on my iPads because of that. But putting a screen protector on your iPad does kind of dull the colors. Actually, it can dull the colors quite a bit. And since one of the best features of the iPad is this beautiful OLED screen, putting a screen protector on it makes you feel like you're losing one of the best parts of the iPad. Now, the S Pen has a little bit of a rubbery tip on it to give it more resistance on the glass screen. And while that actually works pretty well, it doesn't feel quite as natural. It doesn't feel quite as gritty. You definitely feel the rubberiness of that pen. While we're talking about the pen, I kind of want to take a detour here and talk about the Wacom's best feature, and that's something called Instant Pen Display Mode. Now, Instant Pen Display Mode, complete and total pain in the butt to set up, very confusing. It's an hour of your life you will never get back, but once it is set up, it works extraordinarily well. One of the reasons why it's such a pain to set up is because you have to set up your Android tablet in like USB debug mode and developer mode, because it is using features that aren't really native to just general Android. And it's using those features to connect this display to your Mac or to your PC and use it as a native drawing tablet. So that's right, this thing is working the same way a Cintiq would work. Now, Apple and Samsung have apps that can do something similar. However, those apps are operating at the top of the iPad, at the top of the Android stack. I'm probably using the word stack wrong here, I'm sorry. But when you use an app like Super Display on Android, or when you use something like Sidecar on the iPad, I can definitely feel a little bit of lag. I can feel that disconnect there. Using a native Cintiq tablet on a computer just feels faster and snappier. Here, it feels just a little bit delayed. Like, you can use it, it's totally usable. It works surprisingly well, but you can feel that lag. You can feel that distance. And especially if you're using a native app like Procreate or Clip Studio and then you jump over to this mode, you're gonna be like, oh, this doesn't feel as good. And when I'm using the Wacom Move Ink in that mode, I don't have that same feeling. It really feels native when you're using a USB-C connection to your computer. You can also use the Wacom over Wi-Fi in the same exact way. However, when you do use it over Wi-Fi, you do have a little bit more of that separation in there. It doesn't feel nearly as good as plugging it in with a cable. This is probably a good segue into the next section. You're probably wondering what I'm doing here. I've taken over the soundboard, so we're gonna play the proper music for this. Let us talk now about the apps that are available for each platform. Samsung and Wacom are running on Android. The iPad is running on iPad OS, obviously. The main difference here is the apps and what is available. For example, Procreate and Procreate Dreams, only available on the iPad. Krita, only available on Android. But there's a slew of other drawing apps that are available for both. Medibang Paint, Clip Studio, my favorite app, iBiz Paint X. I'd love to sit here all day and name drawing apps, but I'll save you from that pain. For a while there, Adobe was pushing support for the iPad. In general, the iPad just has more and better pro-level app support. Affinity Photo, Affinity Designer, Affinity Publisher are all on here. Eventually, Affinity Studio, which is their new version of those, will be on the iPad iPad. Adobe was supporting the iPad for a while. Maybe they still are. Photoshop and Illustrator have been kind of quiet on the iPad lately. They're still updating Fresco, which is their drawing app. That is a really good app. They have made that free. But in general, over the last 3 or 4 years, Android has really caught up in the quality of apps department. It really comes down to what you want to use your tablet for. If you want some of those design apps, the iPad's probably the way to go. If you really love Procreate, iPad is the way to go. Personally, I really love what Clip Studio has been doing on Android, or doing on mobile in general, because it works on both iPad and Android. And since what I'm doing is primarily drawing, I'm totally cool with going Android. But there are more animation apps available on the iPad. iPad OS on tablets tends to get a little bit more love from Apple in general in terms of new features for tablets. Android is really designed for phones, and oh yeah, you can use it on tablets too. Samsung has been pushing ahead. Samsung has their Dex, which kind of turns your Android tablet into like more of a desktop-y, PC like experience. But some of the new features in iPad OS 26 really make this feel more like a computer. When I'm just using my iPad, even with the keyboard, the windowing features are all right. But when connecting this thing to an external monitor, they're actually really cool. This really does feel more like a computer. The iPad is not a laptop replacement for me yet, but for some people, I think it could be. If you're someone who relies heavily on creative apps and relies on like the Adobe suite or even the Affinity suite, I still think it's better on a standard laptop. Okay, let's see if I can get the right button here. Ah, yes. There's a few other things I want to touch on before we finish this video. In the accessories department, personally, I think the iPad is the clear winner. The Magic Keyboard is just amazing. The fact that the software works so well with the hardware just amplifies that. Now, confession time, it's been about 2 years since I've used like the keyboard cover and that sort of thing with a Samsung device, but when I did use those things, they kind of sucked, which broke my heart because Samsung makes these amazing hardware tablets and then just kind of slaps crummy accessories on them. They may have improved. I really hope they've improved. But since that's not the core thing I'm reviewing in a Samsung tablet, I stopped buying the accessories a few years back. The reason I'm even bringing up the accessories here is because of the Wacom tablet. Specifically, it's kind of a niche product, so there's not going to be many accessories for it. The iPad sells so well, the Galaxy Tab sells so well that a lot of third parties are making cases and accessories and keyboards and things like that for them. So even if you don't want to pay full price for what Apple and Samsung offer, you could usually find something else out there. Or if Samsung stops making keyboard cases a few years down the road that work with yours, you can always find a third party that does. Wacom, it's going to be a little harder to find stuff. When I first got mine, there was no cover at all available for it. So the idea of putting it in a bag and taking it with me kind of scared me. I don't want to scratch or damage this thing. I just checked Amazon and someone is making a case for it. It looks totally gross and disgusting and cheap and junky, but I guess it's something. And when I was playing with accessories, it kind of looks like Galaxy Tab accessories might work on this. I got one of the covers from my old Galaxy Tab to actually connect to the bottom of this thing, since it is pretty much identical dimensions to a Galaxy Tab Ultra. All right, let's play the music again, because it's time for our lightning round. I want to recap the pros and cons here. Good and bad of the iPad is that the pencil is great. The software is great. The hardware is great. Everything about it is really, really good. But if you want to use it as a second screen to draw on, it's probably the weakest of the three here. Sidecar was a good idea, but it's not quite responsive enough, and Apple hasn't really done anything to improve it over the years. The Galaxy Tab is a phenomenal piece of hardware, but the weak point, if we're talking about artists here, is that S Pen. It's not that it's bad, it's just that the Pro Pen from Wacom and the Apple Pencil are just so much better. And then there's the Wacom. It's not quite as powerful as the others. The screen looks great, but it doesn't look quite as good as the others. But the Wacom's secret sauce here is being able to plug it into a computer and use it as a pen display. That's amazing. The other piece is that Pro Pen 3. If you're used to drawing on a Wacom tablet on your PC, jumping over to this is going to feel really seamless. So those are my general thoughts and pros and cons. Obviously, this is all from the point of view of drawing on these things. There's so many things that I left out of this video that I wanted to talk about. What are the important things to you about one of these devices? Let me know down below in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days.